I, of course, had no fucking clue what to expect once the water was running down me and all that electrical shit was happening. For all I knew, it was going to stop my heart and kill me dead right there on the spot. But since I'm sitting here talking to the three of you, obviously that's not what happened. I'm actually kind of glad I got to hear each of your stories first. Your crazy ride, Steve, and solving some of the fucked up riddles here on the rock, and your unique journey, Jake. But then, have you ever had a boring day here at the Ostium Network, or an Ostium for that matter?
Can't say I have. Not since I've met you, at least.
Now, I don't know if that's a compliment or a veiled insult.
Oh, it's definitely a compliment.
Then why the fuck did you hesitate?
I'll keep you guessing.
Are you fucking with me, Jake?
Yes, Monica, I think for once, possibly the first and only time ever, I am.
Oh, you guys. Wait, did that sound as cheesy as it did in my head?
It sure did, man.
But to save your embarrassment, oh look, you're even turning red. I'm going to get started with my story. Like I said, it was good getting to hear both your stories to help me put what I experienced into words. It was sort of like Jake's story at first, but then also sort of like Steve's later on. For the first part of it, it was almost like I was just an observer, and everything was just going to happen whether I wanted it to or not. I felt kind of helpless, to be honest. I even tried moving about, trying to get out of it, but I was firmly trapped and not going anywhere, and it pissed me off. But once I saw what I was being shown, it shut me right up.
Welcome back to KWED. Sofia Gomez here. Tuning into another story tonight of a more colorful variety, we got a new mystery here in Northern California. Of just the strangest variety you're going to hear. Apparently, there's a hidden town approximately 4 hours out of San Francisco, only the actual town hasn't been officially found yet. What has been found is your simple Californian road sign. You know, the ones that let you know you're getting closer to your destination and you figure sooner or later you'll start to see the buildings or some side of town. No physical town has yet to be discovered. There have been a number of visitors, including the first person to discover the town sign, and you'll hear from them in just a moment, as well as professional authorities who have investigated and attempted to find the town, all to no avail. When asked what they were able to find, they reported they kept getting turned around somehow and being brought to the same sign. One police officer was even left standing by the town sign to ensure that it was the same sign they were being brought back to, which was confirmed. As for the actual town sign in question, the details are sparring. The town's name is Ostium. That's Ostium. Through our research, we've learned that is the Latin word for door. And below the name are two more details. One, the elevation at 282 feet, which is believed to be the correct number for the approximate location of Ostium. The other is the town's population, which according to the sign is 0. Let me repeat that for anyone who might have missed it or thought they misheard. According to the sign, the population for this town is 0. Nothing. As in, there are no people living there. And before you ask, yes, there is not another town sign like this to be found anywhere else in the country that we know of. Each town always has a population, otherwise it can be two things. Either it is designated a ghost town, which has been abandoned and therefore the details on any sign no longer apply, or if there are 0 people residing in that town, it is not a town by definition. It is a true conundrum wrapped in enigma at this point, because there are simply no answers to this mystery. More people continue to visit the sign daily. Instagram has been flooded with visitors posting selfies with the sign, putting to pasture any conspiracy theorists who believe the sign and town itself to be a hoax or fake news. With conspiracies ranging from some bizarre sociological government experiment to see how the general population will react, to a fabrication done as a prank, much like the strange monoliths that were erected in northern San Juan County, Utah, and back to Dama Hill in Romania that were later confirmed to be orchestrated. At this point, if this is somehow a bizarre prank, the intention behind it remains unclear. Nevertheless, authorities will continue to investigate, and it has been rumored they may shut down access to the sign in the near future, along with the road leading to the town that cannot be found. and visitors can continue to get those selfies for the time being. But let's hear now from the first person to discover the mysterious ostium sign.
My husband and I had been vacationing in Fort Bragg for 2 weeks. We'd been there about 5 days, and it was beautiful and everything, but I was ready for a change, just for one day. So I convinced George to go on a long drive. With our phones and GPS and all that, you really can't get lost these days. And I just wanted to go on an adventure. You know what I mean? Just a change of scenery. One day, that's it. And then I'd be all ready to return to the gorgeous coastline again. So we packed up a great big picnic with lots of water. Can't ever have too much water, you know. And then we set up and just drove for hours and hours. Took bathroom breaks when we needed them, of course. And it was just wonderful. Seeing the land change from the coastline to the dense forest and, what was that? Oh, yes, of course. My apologies. After around 3 hours, we weren't near any towns or villages. I never know what the difference is, or even houses for that matter. And we were just driving along this narrow road, and it felt like the walls of vegetation were on each side were just closing in on us. It was honestly a little creepy, and then we came to the road sign. I slowed down till we stopped in front of it, and there it was. Ostium, population 0. We were both completely confuzzled, so I said, well, let's go check it out. So we kept driving, and the funniest thing happened. We saw the backside of the sign. I stopped just as we passed to make sure it was the same one, and it was. I could tell because there was this dirty smear beneath the O, mud or something. But I noticed it the first time I saw it, and there it was again. I pointed out to George, and he agreed, and then he got like this look in his eye, and I think I had it too because he started looking at me funny. Even though we've only been together for 5 years, we know each other inside and out. We both wanted to get out of there quickly. George didn't even need to tell me. I turned the Prius back on and zoomed out of there, and we didn't stop until we got back to Fort Bragg. Dear George took a few photos, which he posted on his Instagram, and the following morning the photos had gone viral, and all of her friends were getting in touch, and before I knew it, the authorities got in touch. I thought we'd done something wrong at first, but no, they just wanted to know about the sign and where exactly we were when we saw it, and the rest, as they say, is history.
I was obviously shocked. Well, only a little at first, I guess, because I wasn't sure if it was real. But the more I thought about it after everything I'd been through with Jake, well, I figured it had to be real. And that scared the fuck out of me. Ostium had been found by the whole world, it seemed. Only that wasn't exactly true. They'd found the sign, but the actual town hadn't been found yet. I felt like that could only be a matter of time, though. Ostium seemed to be keeping itself hidden for now. But eventually someone was going to find it. I then asked myself, didn't that depend on how many people knew about it and how curious they all were? This was just a small Northern California radio station. Sure, the photos had gone viral, and anyone nearby wanting to make the long trip would be visiting. But a week or two and that sign and Ostium would be forgotten, right? That's when I realized I needed to be sure. I needed to find out what the real world knew about Ostium. I always thought Jake was the random fluke.
Oh, thanks, Monica.
I mean that in the nicest way, Jake. You worked really fucking hard to find Ostium, and the town or the Ostium network or whatever powers that be helped you find it too. It's definitely a compliment.
Okay, thanks. That does make me feel a lot better.
So I needed to track down all the instances of Ostium being mentioned and find out if they were, 1, actually about the town, and 2, whether they led people closer to finding the town. and started with the basic tool that got everything going with Jake and GeoGuessr. I Googled ostium. It was like having a computer in your head. I say this for your sake, Jake. Steve and I used to have implants and already had that ability, so it wasn't too much of a stretch to start working that way. Sure, it had been a bunch of times since the implants had been removed, and it took a little practice and getting used to getting things going, but it didn't take me long to get comfortable looking for signs of ostium in my head. Took some heavy reading at first. I got a lot of medical shit since, as we all know, ostium is Latin for door, and it gets used in medical procedures and textbooks and papers and all that stuff a lot. So that had to be found, accessed, and removed from the search. It was actually starting to remind me a bit of my crazy deep research dive I did back when I was narrowing down where I wanted to travel through the ostium door to. There were a few music references, songs and albums, and even a couple artists, but those were easily thrown away. I guess it's kind of hard for you to picture this, Jake, since it all sounds pretty sci-fi to you, right?
I can get the gist of it, but you're right, Monica. This is completely new territory here, and I'm just going to have to take your word for it.
The shared genius of the cranial implant is that you don't have to follow a preconceived guide or infrastructure or layout. There aren't really any rules to follow and learn. It's all up to you. You get to create the system and architecture. If you want a giant multi-story library, you can have that. If you want piles and piles of, books, paper, and even fucking floppy disks, you can have that if you want. You pick the medium in the arrangement, you suggest the organizational system in the implant follows your rules and makes it happen.
Even if you want a big pile of random shit, it'll do it for you.
Really, Steve?
Only for a little while, Mum. Then I went for color coding. Everything was in all these different specific colors, and they were grouped together by a common color.
That sounds really cool.
It was.
Sounds like it. Does that make things a little clearer, Jake?
Yeah, I think so. I get it now how you were able to sift through so much and get rid of the details you knew weren't important.
Exactly. Otherwise, things would have taken a lot fucking longer. Although at that point, since I was stuck in who the fuck knows where, it could take 100 years because I didn't really have any idea of the passage of time.
Damn, you're right. I didn't either.
Nor me. Could have been seconds or minutes or donkey's years.
Sure, Steve.
I think I had the idea that I was, somewhere inside the ostium network, where time didn't really matter. But I wasn't going to let that shit get to me. I had a new quest I was on, and it had been too fucking long since the last one. So I was going to get the answers I wanted, even if I had to pry them out of the cold, dead circuits and computer chips of the ostium network. No insult intended, Zhang.
None taken, Monica.
So whatever I was experiencing, wherever I was in the ostium network, it felt a lot like using the implant. And then it was a case of investigating these instances of ostium.
Or ostium stances, if you will.
No. Just no, Jake. Try it again, and I won't allow you to talk for a while. Got it?
Got it, Monica.
So I picked one of the ostium instances at random and kind of zoomed in on it. It was a single page pinned to a big notice board by some bathrooms. And it was just a little sentence, and with an email address to contact on those little strips of paper at the bottom you pull off. Usually, it's for someone looking for a roommate or something they're trying to sell or buy. In this case, it said, "Have you seen ostium?" in big black letters with a giant question mark underneath. And the little strips had an email address printed on them, lookingforostium@gmail.com. That's where I needed to go next. So I closed my eyes and, like you did, Jake, kind of visualized myself being there. It was just a feeling I got, an idea out of nowhere to try. Part of me was thinking, oh, I must be going batshit crazy, while the other part totally believed it was going to work. I just waited to see which one was right. I opened my eyes and there it was, back in fucking civilization again. It was overwhelming at first. Fortunately, I was off to the side down a narrow hallway that led to the bathrooms, out of the main flow of traffic, which was good because I was having a hard time processing all this. Being back in a normal mall in a normal city in the United States. Wow. And then it hit me again. And this time, I had to lean against the wall and take some deep breaths. It wasn't my time or some crazy Ostium Network time. This was the time I'd been studying for so long, thinking I was going to go back to one day. Totally planning to, in fact, but I never did. And now, here I was, and I could see an electronic sign that had a map of the mall and its many stores. It said the name of this place was the Mall of America in Bloomington, Minnesota, and the date was February 21st, 2020. Okay. Maybe that was just a little outside the range of my planned visit via the Ostium door. I think I set the latest date at 2010, but still, it was kind of uncanny to really be here. In a place that was as average and American as apple pie and baseball. A few minutes went by and this all started to sink in. I got back on my feet again. I walked down the hallway where no one had joined me to use the restrooms, which was good, since I was still kind of a mess. And then I saw the notice board with tons of business cards for everything you could imagine. Full-page ads for dry cleaners and nail salons and sales at a local store, and there was the page down by the bottom, kind of hidden, but not for anyone who was looking for it. I ripped off one of the slips and double-checked the email address. There it was, lookingforostium@gmail.com. I took out my datapad and saw I was automatically connected to the Wi-Fi. Okay. Now I was starting to feel pretty fucking lucky for ending up in this decade. If this was like 20 years before 2019, I'd have had to hide this datapad from everyone, and getting on the internet wouldn't have been so easy. And if this had been back in, say, the 80s or 90s, would I even be able to send an email? I started a new email and used Ostium as the subject, and then just said, "I'm interested," with the initial M. I hit send and realized I might have made a terrible mistake if the receiver of my email would see that this email was being sent from the future somehow. I kind of hoped my datapad info had synced with the current date and it wouldn't look like a time-traveling piece of electronic correspondence. Of course, that might help my case and get the person on the other end to respond quicker. I guess in time I'd find out. I walked back down the hallway and out into the main concourse and watched all these different people walking by, shopping for who knows what. Crap they probably didn't really need, but just wanted to have. I saw on the other side of the big sign was a flat-screen TV with the news showing. I couldn't hear it, so I got closer. There was this headline along the bottom that said COVID-19 update. What the fuck was COVID?
Not known how quickly it will spread or how it is spread. It was confirmed today that the first case of COVID-19 has been reported in Italy. Scientists are still baffled at where this virus came from and to what extent it will spread around the globe. Governments worldwide are preparing however they can for the potential of a pandemic, though many in power say it will not reach that extent. Nevertheless, there are some scientists, like Dr. Jamila Lawrence, who says this may eclipse the entire planet and she has no idea when we will come out of it. But we do not want to imply any cause for alarm here, but recommend people wash their hands often and start to consider wearing masks if they get sick. Some of the symptoms of COVID-19 include...
My datapad buzzed, and I saw I'd gotten an email back. That was fucking fast. It said, "What do you know of Ostium?" Okay, the person was testing me, seeing if I had any info to give. What could I tell them that wouldn't be too much, but would give them something? I typed out, "I know it's a town that can't be found, where there are no people." Less than 30 seconds later, I got another message. Are you in Bloomington? We need to meet. Good. That was a little faster than I expected, but I needed to find out how much this person actually knew. I looked outside at the massive mall parking lot. There was a lamppost with the letter F on it. I emailed back that I'd meet them by the F sign. I thought about saying F for fuck, but thought that might be a bit too presumptuous of me. Less than 10 seconds this time. They said they'd meet me there in 10 minutes. Well, here goes. I arrived early because I wanted to see whomever was coming from a distance and be ready for anything they might be planning. I had my preconceptions about what they might be like, and I'm sure they felt the same way. And then I saw him coming. Tall guy, big guy, tough guy, and a brother no less.
Are you M?
Yep. And you are?
You can call me D.
Sticking to single-letter names. I like it. All clandestine and shit.
Ostium ain't no joke. It's some serious shit.
And what do you know about it?
Why don't you tell me what you know first?
I thought you were the one who was going to be giving me answers. That's what it said on the notice board.
Okay, but I gotta know if you know something. And you're not here to pump me for information. You could be a fucking reporter for all I know.
Honey, I ain't no reporter. If I told you who I really was, well, it would blow your fucking mind. I know some stuff about Ostium. I know roughly where it is. I know all the authorities really know is there's a town sign but no town. And no one fucking lives there.
Alright, good. You know your shit.
So are you going to tell me something I don't know?
I know it's got something to do with a guy named Jake. Oh, so you do know more than you've been telling.
I don't know anything about anyone called Jake.
Nah, you can't fool me. I've been a therapist for over 20 years. Seen a lot of different patients in my time, and if there's anything I've learned, it's that the eyes don't lie. You could have a poker face, keep your facial muscles from twitching and all that shit, but the eyes always tell the truth.
Fine. I might know a guy called Jake. What's he got to do with Ostium?
Through a buddy of mine. I used to live in San Fran. Well, I guess I still do, actually. Still got a place there, but I've been on the hunt for the last year, learning everything I can about this place called Ostium.
What's that got to do with Jake?
This friend, Brandon, we used to hang out at a sports bar, watching the Giants play, and chatting about whatever. And then one day he comes in looking like he hasn't slept in over a week. He said a good friend of his was missing, a guy named Jake. He'd waited at the guy's place for days, and then Jake finally showed. Brandon said Jake told him he had found this weird hidden town where there were these doors that somehow took him to different places in time. Brandon obviously didn't believe it, and it sounded like a bunch of bullshit to me. Then he said Jake switched his story, and he just said he met a girl and they'd been having fun together, and that's why he'd been gone so long.
So it's the mystery. Neither you nor Brandon believed this Jake.
This all happened to Brandon a month before he came into the bar and found me. He hasn't seen Jake since. Been looking all over the city for him. He said even if Jake was telling the truth about the girl, Brandon would have heard from him in one way or another, but there was nothing. Then he said, does that mean what he was first telling me was actually true?
What did you tell him?
I said, I don't see how it possibly could be. It just all sounds too far-fetched. Brandon said, yeah, he was thinking pretty much the same thing, and that's when the shots arrived. After that, it gets a little hazy for me, and way more hazy for him.
So what the fuck are you doing here in Bloomington, Minnesota, talking to me then?
Because I heard a radio show on KQED talking about a sign they found called Ostium, and I saw photos on Instagram that got me thinking, what if this Jake guy was right? Somehow. And since then, I've been tracking down every lead and mention of the word Ostium wherever I can find it.
And why'd you put up that sign asking for more info?
That's actually a funny story. I got some friends around the country helping me out, giving me any leads that they come across. And one of them said they saw a pic online of this notice board in the Mall of America, and they're pretty sure there was something on there mentioning Ostium. So I came to Bloomington.
Wait. Hang on a minute. How long have you been doing this?
Almost a year.
Oh, Jesus, that's a long time. I'm guessing you've got some sick time saved up, plus some savings?
Something like that. Anyway, I checked the notice board. No such fucking luck. Then I checked all over the damn mall and couldn't find the word ostium anywhere. So that's when I decided to try it for myself. Put up my own sign, and you responded.
And how long was that sign up there before you heard from me?
2 weeks.
Uh-huh. And how many other people you heard from?
You would be the first.
Yeah, I figured as much. So, over this whole year you've been doing this, how much intel you got on ostium?
Pretty much everything I've told you. And what you told me. I already knew all that. But it sounds like you might have some more. Do you?
When's the last time you talked to Brandon?
That's also kind of weird. I haven't heard from Brandon since that time he came into the bar and told me what he knew. I've been trying to get in touch with him everywhere. Got friends in the city looking out for him as well, but no one's heard anything from him.
So this guy Jake goes missing and now Brandon's AWOL?
That's pretty much the thick of it.
And how many times have you come across the name ostium in your travels?
Hey, how about you give me some of your info and then I'll give you some of mine? How's that sound?
No. Answer my question, and then I'll think about telling you more.
Fine. I've come across the word 6 times. All 6 of those times have been more people trying to find out about ostium. Some of them know a bit of what I know, or all of it, and the rest know jack shit.
It's been a long year, huh?
Sure fucking has. I'm a patient guy, though. But it's starting to feel like a complete waste of time. And now we've got this virus that's starting to get out of hand.
Is that, COVID-19, I think I saw they're calling it?
Yeah.
So you believe some of the crazy stories they're telling, that it could become a global pandemic and basically shut down the planet?
It's because of global travel. All the flights and airlines, there's no real way to contain it other than shutting everything down.
You really think it will get to that?
I don't know. I have a feeling it might, but I'm really hoping it doesn't. It'll mean my investigation into ostium will be limited to anything I can find online.
Well, it's not like you've been finding a ton by traveling all around the country, is it?
Nah, you're right. I've been getting ready to throw in the towel and head back home, but then I got your email. So, do you know anything more?
I'm sorry. I know basically the same, except for one thing, which I'm going to tell you. But here's the deal. You don't get to ask questions. I'm going to tell it to you, and that's it. And then I'm gone, and you're on your own. You keep it to yourself, got it? Don't tell any of your ostium groupies.
Affirmative. I'm keeping it to myself.
Good. And like I said, after I tell you, I'm walking away, and that's it. If you find anything new, you know my email. But I don't think it's likely we'll be seeing each other again. Okay?
Can't say I'm really thrilled, but what choice do I have?
Exactly. You know how they found the ostium sign and they keep trying to find the town, but no one's seen a single building of that place?
Yeah, they keep getting turned around somehow and ending up back at the sign. I even did it myself. 5 times. Same thing happened every time. Made me pissed, but I couldn't figure out what was going wrong or how I was getting turned around.
Sure. The reason that's happening is because the town of Ostium is untethered. And that's it. See ya.
What does that even fucking mean? I don't get it.
I make my way quickly back through the mall to that notice board. I rip off the sheet that says, "Have you seen ostium?" and toss it in the trash can. And then I go into the restroom and lock myself in a stall. It's okay. Ostium's safe. For now, at least. Doesn't know anything, and no one else really does either. other than the few details from the radio show and the photos.
Why did you tell him about Ostium being untethered?
I don't really know. Draymond's a good guy, and he was trying really hard to get some answers, just like we've been from the very beginning. He's kind of like us.
Yeah, I can see that. But it's still a bit of a risk telling him.
What's he going to do with knowing Ostium is untethered? He doesn't even know what that fucking means.
But there's something else too, right?
Yeah, you're right, Steve. I wanted to make sure he stayed on our side. I don't know if we'll ever meet again, but I have this little feeling.
An Ostium feeling?
Fuck you, Jake. But yeah, sure. If I'm going to call it a type of feeling, sure, an Ostium feeling that our paths might cross again at some point in the future.
Or the past.
Yeah, smarty pants. But if it does happen, I just want him to know we're on his side. We're all in this together.
That he can trust us?
Yes, and more importantly, that we can trust him if we need to.
So is that the end of your story?
Not by a long shot, and this is where things get real fucking interesting.
Nice.
What did you say?
Nice. As in, that was a nice line you just used. Cool and cliffhangery.
I wasn't just feeding you a cool line. Some serious shit happened to me.
Sorry, I believe you, Monica. I still thought it was nice.
How did you get back to the limbo or whatever you were in before?
Same way Jakey did it. Closed my eyes, wished really hard, and clicked my heels together 3 times.
Did you really?
What do you think?
Everything except for clicking the heels. I don't know. Maybe you did?
Okay, fine. I just clicked them together once. Happy you got that out of me?
For some reason, yes.
Once I was back in that nowhere land, it was time for a reassessment of sorts. I was confident that while there was a lot more people in the States who now knew about the possible existence of Ostium, all they had was some random sign, and no one had a hint of an idea about anything called the Ostium Network. But, as Jake has pointed out to me at least once or twice, I just wasn't thinking fourth dimensionally.
I do it with love.
I know, Jakey. But to badly quote the same movie we're all so fond of, I've got a time machine. I can pretty much do whatever the fuck I want. And I was thinking about how far the word and knowledge of Ostium might have traveled, not just across the globe, but in other instances, other tangents of reality. We already know that the Ostium Network does a great job of sinking its tenacious time-traveling talons pretty much everywhere and everyone if they want to.
Okay, I'm sorry, but I just have to give you mad props for that fantastic bit of alliteration.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty cool too, Mum.
Why, thank you. I'm pretty proud of it myself. Just rolled off the tongue. So, I needed to broaden my horizons and broaden my search. I thought about where it should start and settled on the time and place when the city and Rock of Gibraltar ceased to exist and instantly became the Ostium Network. I was combing the interwebs for any mentions of Ostium and started to find some chatter. Not much, but there were hints of a small hidden town on a tiny island called the Azores. There are small island groups specifically in the middle of the Atlantic, and the island of Santa Maria is off to the east, and there's only one decent-sized town on the island, Villa de Porto, with a population of around 5,500. That's where all the activity was. But there were a couple sightings of something in the center of the island, where there was this dense, lush forest reserve called... Oh, damn. Hang on a second. Let me focus on getting it right. My Portuguese isn't what it used to be.
You really speak Portuguese, Mum?
A little. Picked up some in my worldly travels when I was building shit around the planet, and it actually stuck. So it's called A Reserva Florestal de Recreo Mato de Alto. Not that the name is that important. Something about flower reserve in a high place, essentially. One tourist thought they'd seen some buildings, another that it was an old ruin, and another had passed over in a helicopter and seen some sort of settlement. It was enough for me to go on, and I needed to be sure. So I did the old vanishing trick again, closed my eyes, and wished to be in this middle-of-nowhere place. Just like you did, Jake, when visiting somewhere new, I arrived with my eyes closed and started with a deep breath. I smelled lush greenery, soaring trees, and tropical forests. And then I opened my eyes and choked. It was gorgeous, eye-wateringly gorgeous, and smelled like fucking awesome nature does. And the few short eyewitness accounts had been totally correct. There was a town before me, but it was also a ruin. From the air, it would look overgrown and retaken by nature. Think something like Angkor Wat. There may have been people living in this small town at one time, but now there was no one. Probably some animals, because it had become a local ecosystem. I don't know what kind of animals they have there in the Azores. I walked up to the gate and saw a familiar lock hanging from it, only this time with a new shape. Pentagonal. Okay, not one of mine then. It was busted so I wouldn't have any trouble getting in. Not what I'm used to with Ostium or the Ostium network. I hadn't seen a sign anywhere on the outside. Maybe there was one somewhere on one of the roads, but I didn't think it was likely. If there ever had been one, it was long gone now, because this place looked ancient. Like it hadn't been inhabited not just in decades, but centuries. I walked inside and saw it was totally fucking run down and abandoned. Piles of rock all over the walls had started crumbling, as well as the buildings. And yet, after all that, it still looked and felt familiar to me, because it was a familiar town, because it was Ostium, because it was a different Ostium. I'd confirmed what I'd been wondering all along, that the Ostium network hadn't just created one Ostium town, they created at least two, and my best guess was there were one or two more, at least. Which was terrifying in its own right. But as I looked all around me, I could tell that this place wasn't another one of Ostium Network's successes, if you could call the town of Ostium any sort of success. I guess they had, in a way, proved what they had set out to do, which was create a way to travel through time. But this place, this place, this couldn't be considered anything else than a failure. And whoever had been here knew and abandoned it like an unwanted pet or a child. All the buildings looked sad and forlorn. Where the windows should be, or whatever futuristic material the Ostium network used for what they called glass, there were nothing but broken, jagged holes. Guess it wasn't as tough and impenetrable as it seemed, although I doubt it was just the wear and tear of nature that caused all this destruction. Something clearly very wrong had taken place here. Something devastating and finite. I walked over to the closest building. While the structure seemed fractured and beyond repair, the doors still seemed solid. The number on it was covered in the dirt and grime of the passage of time. I spat on my hand and vigorously rubbed at it. 246. A high number. It didn't mean anything to me, But then the numbers never really did they, Jake?
Not as far as I've ever been able to tell. There never seemed to be any pattern or logic to the numbering system, and you could never predict whether you were going to go forward in time or to the past. Until Ostium changed or twisted its mode of operation to mess with my fate, or whatever you want to call it, when I started being able to predict to some degree if we'd be going ahead or back, and then visiting one of the old haunts from my own life.
Plus the occasional crazy fucked up earthquake or untethering.
Yeah, who could forget those wonderful incidents?
Not me.
Me neither.
Either way, I tried pushing open the door, turning the handle, anything that might make it open or budge. Couldn't help but remember the time I'd been in this predicament before, when you were sleeping, Jake, and I wanted to see if the doors would open for me. And then there was the time they did, and I faced all manner of banshee horror on the other side. So I'll fully admit, I really hoped it stayed closed. And thankfully it did. Whatever magic beans had been spilled to make Ostium allow its doors to be opened for me had either failed or ceased to work in this other Ostium. But like I said, I was totally fucking fine with that. So then I got to do something I don't think any of us have ever gotten to do before. I got to peek in through the window of a building in Ostium, or one of the towns of Ostium, I guess, to be exact. And it was horrific. I think it might have been Pompeii. Couldn't be exact, and I only got snapshots. Like a flickering series of images, but sort of in slow motion, so I could see all the gory detail. There were so many people being killed, smothered by boiling hot ash, hit by falling rocks. It looked like it was the end of the fucking world. But it was just another volcanic eruption, except there happened to be a Roman city beneath it. I think whoever it was, or maybe it was more than one person, used this door to travel back there, to the eruption of Vesuvius and the end of Pompeii. Only they totally picked the wrong fucking spot to arrive in, and the wrong damn time. And were completely caught up in it, victims of their own dream of time traveling. It had gone the worst it possibly could, and now they were part of history, I guess, in a really terrible way. I couldn't take any more. I needed to move on. I could have gone straight to the next building over, across the street to that one that was across from me, but everything just looked so damned fucking bleak. So I wanted to change it up. I decided to be completely random. Yes, I know that sounds like an oxymoron, but you know what I mean. I went down one street and then another and then one more for good luck. And then just stopped and stared at one building. Then, really giving into that spontaneity, I turned around and went to the opposite building, stopping in front of the door. And I shit you not, the number said 246. Again. I wasn't going to bother trying the door, knowing I'd just be dealt the same cruel joke. But I did go over to the fucking window, feeling an undeniable and unavoidable sense of intense fucking deja vu. And then those images came again, unbidden and even more horrific. Now I saw people on fire, melting in a river of lava, their flesh being boiled and blistered, and they screamed in agony. These terrible events were much worse than what happened at Pompeii, but I could see it was the same place, the same buildings, and even some of the same people. This was another tangent where things were even worse for the Roman people. And in this chain of events, not a single person got out alive. I wrenched myself away, barely stopping myself from falling on my ass. Jesus, those were some horrors I never wanted to fucking see again. But I felt the curiosity growing in me. The wonder asking, should I? If I'd already seen 2 possible manifestations of the eruption of Vesuvius on the people of Pompeii, would another show me a tangent where things weren't so bad? Where the eruption wasn't so violent? Or where they'd known and understood more and could have gotten to safety and been rescued sooner? I had to find out. I had to be sure. I ran as fast as I could this time to door number 1, the clock tower. I wanted to find a place of rest first, a place of tranquility, and the clock tower had always been that place for me, for all of us. It didn't take long to get there. I reached for the door handle and then stopped. This door didn't have a big old number 1 on it like it fucking should. It said 2, 4, 6. The handle didn't turn. The door refused to open. I stepped slowly over to a shattered window and leaned in. The people were all staring at me now, covered in blood from eyeballs to toes, naked and resigned to their inevitable deaths. Behind them, the volcano spewed lava so red, it looked like a geyser of blood. That was fucking it! I got the fuck out of there as fast as I could. I didn't care if there was a building with a broken window showing me some shiny, happy Pompeians, because I knew it didn't fucking exist. This ostium was broken and rotten to the core. No good could ever come of it. So I didn't waste my time. I ran out the front gate just in case there was some bad vibe, timey-wimey stuff in there, and closed my eyes and set myself onto the next ostium, when I hoped would be better than this one, because even if it was an infinitesimal amount, it would still be better. It would still be worth it. I knew it was ostium again right away, just like you could recognize your childhood home at any time, or the place where that special thing happened to you, which you'll never forget. And at the same time, it felt totally fucking alien and wrong. The first thing that caught my eye was the stone ceiling. Oh yeah, there was stone all fucking around me. Stone ceiling, stone floor, stone walls and all the buildings ahead. A stone archway surrounding the open gateway I'd just appeared in. Stone as far as the eye could see, and not your familiar gray-looking stone, but a kind of sandy ochre color. It definitely gave off a vibe like those homes we visited of the Anasazi.
The ancient ones, yeah. They were built right into the side of the mountain, kind of like cave dwellings, only much more elaborate. And they use them for storage, too.
Yeah, it was similar, but I knew it was real different, too. There was just the impending sense of a great weight above me, and then it clicked. I was underground.
Wait a minute. A town of ostium under the ground? Like subterranean?
Yeah, now you're starting to get an idea of how much this freaked me out once I realized what the fuck was going on here. I believe your word of choice, Jake, would have been discombobulating.
Guilty as charged. I was literally about to say that.
Do I know you or what?
Never had any doubt.
So, after getting my below sea level bearings...
Hey, have you ever heard of Cooper Petty?
Jake, you totally ruined my cool line.
Yeah, I got it, Monica. Below sea level bearings. It was funny. Sorry to interrupt, but this thought just came to me.
Sort of sounds like you stuck the first two random words that came into your head together, to be honest.
No, I'm telling the truth, and I'm sorry, Monica, but when you said this ostium was underground, it got my little gray cells going, and it just came to me out of the blue. It's this old mining town in the middle of the South Australian desert. They built a bunch of houses literally underground because it's like 120 degrees average there during the day. But in their cozy underground abode, it stays in even 73 degrees, and they all totally love living down there.
Oh, is that the end of your rant?
Well, I don't think I'd call it a rant exactly.
Sorry, Jake, I do have to defend my mum here. You did severely interrupt her and throw her off her rhythm.
I know, but Cooper Petty just came into my head.
I think you just like saying those two words.
I notice you don't.
That's because I still kind of think they're made up.
Aren't all words technically made up?
And would you like me to punch you?
No, thank you. Not at all. Please continue.
As I got closer to some of the buildings, I was able to confirm that the doors were still wooden, and there were numbers in the usual spots. And yes, the numbers weren't the same this time, which was an immediate fucking relief to me. Also, I noticed how mild it was in this underground ostium.
Did you really?
I did. If I had to pick a totally random temperature, I'd say it was around 73 degrees. But this time, I wanted to go straight to the clock tower first. And it was in the exact same place it should be in any ostium town. Except the clock tower went up through the ceiling. I couldn't see the top of it. And I don't know if there was a clock at the top or not. I guess maybe it went all the way up to the surface, however high that was. In the middle of the hot desert was this weird pointy clock tower sticking out of the ground. But I just ignored it for then, turned the handle, and pushed open the door and stopped in my tracks. Any ideas what the first words out of my mouth were?
I'll take a stab at this, Mum. It'll only end bad for you, Jake, if you try.
Agreed.
I would hesitate to guess, but not really. You said, and I quote, "What the fuck?"
Bingo! You win the car and the house and the swanky vacation package.
What?
It's a 90s thing. Sorry.
I get it, Monica.
It still doesn't get you off the hook for what you did earlier. The reason I said those exact words almost emphatically was because the inside was much like the outside. All stone made of sand. There was the same furniture you'd expect to see in the clock tower, minus our personal items naturally, table and chairs and map table, but everything was made of sandstone. It was like there'd been an intense sandstorm and then a bunch of time had passed and it had all hardened and turned to stone.
Or the sandstone version of Medusa showed up.
Oh, okay, that's good. I'll allow it, and you're forgiven for your earlier interruption. And this one. Because I do think something like that happened. Obviously not actually fucking Medusa, although now that I'm saying it and actually thinking about it.
I guess it's possible in some ostium universe or tangent.
I did check 3 other buildings going in order and found a very weird sandstone Roanoke, a trippy sandstone Mary Celeste, and a solid sandstone Martian base, which kind of looked like the rest of the Martian landscape, so that was a little more underwhelming. And I took that as enough evidence this place had gone through something. Whatever they'd done here, it had really fucking backfired, and now everything was made out of the same material as the surrounding geology. Was this caused by one of the Ostium Network peeps going through the wrong door, going to the wrong place, or going to the wrong time? Had they brought back something they shouldn't have? Did this happen when they did whatever they did to manifest the Ostium town in this location, in this reality? Or was it a case of the town appearing and fusing with the sandstone, or making everything just turn into sandstone? Maybe they crossed the streams, or fucked up the calculations, and it all backfired in this way. Did anyone get caught in the crossfire? Killed or turned to stone? Maybe I needed to start looking around for any body parts poking out of the sandstone walls or ceilings. Although, as I had that thought, I knew I most certainly wasn't going to fucking do that.
Or maybe Medusa showed?
Sure, maybe Medusa showed up. Maybe they did something to royally piss her off and she decided regular stone wasn't good enough. This time it was personal. And she was using fucking sandstone magic on everyone and everything.
I suppose it's another possibility to add to the ever-growing list of just what Ostium can do to you, and proving the point that it doesn't give a shit.
And nor does the Ostium Network.
Right, but what do you mean?
Because this wasn't the last Ostium town I encountered. There were 2 more, and they made the first 2 seem kinda tame.
Oh shit.
Oh shit indeed. I arrived, or maybe landed is a better word. Ah! Oh! I slammed into the wall hard. Definitely rattled my cage for a bit. And then once things settled, I kind of wished I'd stayed dizzy and unfocused because I was up in the air, like way fucking up high in the air. I could see way, way far down below, all green and yellow and brown solid ground, meaning I was at least a cruising altitude of 30,000+ feet, except I wasn't safely protected inside a moving metal plane, but in another Ostium. And the ground wasn't even fucking flat here. Everything was severely tilted to the right, which was why as soon as I'd landed, I basically started falling and just managed to stop myself planting face first into the wall of an Ostium building. I flipped myself around and then noticed a lot of really fucking shocking things all at once. The first 2 I've already mentioned, and the third one was that I wasn't inside the town of Ostium exactly, no. I was on a piece of the town of Ostium, and this was just one of many pieces scattered all around me, like someone had just tossed a box of puzzle pieces on the floor, except the floor was the sky in this case, and the puzzle pieces were parts of this Ostium town I was in, and I was precariously gripping onto the wall of the half building that was on one of those pieces, trying my best not to lose it, and hoping at the same time I wasn't going to drop out of the sky once the laws of gravity and physics started working properly again.
That sounds fucking terrifying, Mum.
Oh, it was, honey. It really was. But since I'm here to tell the tale, I managed to get out of it somehow. So stop interrupting and let me keep yakking.
Sorry.
So to recap on what this fucking crazy-looking Ostium town was like, 1, it was broken into around 100 small pieces. 2, they were not flat, but all tilted at weird and crazy angles. There were even a few that were upside down, and thank God I didn't end up on one of those. 3, it was way the fuck high up in the sky where planes and crazy-ass birds like to hang out. So, to help myself keep cool, which was obviously impossible, I weighed my options and thought about what I could do here to try to get myself through the next few minutes. First thing I tried was zapping myself the hell out of there. I'd arrived here, so why shouldn't I be able to leave just as easily, like I'd done in the other Ostiums? I closed my eyes and wished myself anywhere else but here, and this time I clicked my heels together 3 times Dorothy style. I opened my eyes and, damn it, I'm still there. I tried it a couple more times for good luck and didn't budge an inch. So there went that plan. What about a door? That was an option, right? Hadn't worked at all before in my favor. Well, but maybe this time. I looked at what part of a building I had on my little piece of Ostium territory and saw there was a half a door. Okay. At least it was the half that had the handle. No, not the side with the hinges. How the hell was it staying connected to what was left of the door frame? I hear you ask. I don't fucking know. But I was going to give it a shot anyway. I turned the handle and pushed. The damn thing just broke off and gravity started doing its thing. Shit! I really thought that was going to work when it started opening. At this point, I was thinking whatever good vibes and luck I'd earned from the powers that be with Ostium had finally run out, and it was time for some really cruddy payback. I'd noticed the number on the door, and I shit you not, it was 666. Yeah, hence me thinking that bad luck was coming my way. Then I started looking at the other pieces of Ostium, the ones that were closest to me. More bits of building, one just a flat space, and one that looked like it was flat, but with some sort of pedestal in the middle of it. And I could see from there was an engraving on top of it. I couldn't make out any words. I also knew I'd never seen anything like this before in any of the Ostiums. Closest thing was the map table, and we all know how fucking important that is. But this was different. This was new, and so that automatically meant it might be just as big of a deal. I figured it was all I had to go on right now. In the back of my mind, these pieces could start dropping out of the sky at any moment, and before I knew it, my piece of hallowed ground would be joining them. So I decided at this point, I really had only one option. I needed to find out what was written on that pedestal, and that involved me getting over to that piece of Ostium. There was maybe a 6-foot space between the two pieces, with the very hard and solid ground distantly below. I slowly pushed myself off from the protective wall I'd been leaning against since I slammed into it. I took a few precarious steps, seeing if this thing was going to swivel like a boat in water, but it stayed firm, solid. I did a little jump, then a bigger one in the same place. Still no movement. Okay, good. Wasn't going anywhere. Now I had to will myself to... I took some very deep breaths. And then I just fucking did it. God damn! I fucking made it. It took me a long time to get my breath back, my heart rate down, and wanting to prise my fingers and arms from this very solid pedestal. Then I slowly stood up. I didn't know if this new piece of Ostium was as solid as the former one. I actually looked back at my old piece of refuge and thought how it looked really fucking far away now. I could not believe I just did that. But I was here, and I was still alive and kicking for the time being. Then I looked at the top of the pedestal and started reading. If you've come here by mistake, we apologize. This Ostium was never meant to be. It was originally constructed on May 15th, 2255, in the Telander system on the planet Ongwan. The goal was to make the first aerial Ostium town. All portents pointed to a resounding success, and it was, for 5 minutes. And then the first skyquake hit. A new phenomenon that had never been witnessed before, and in fact, may be localized only to Ongwan, or perhaps just the Telander system. We believe it may have something to do with the proximity of two relatively nearby black holes. This pedestal will serve as a warning for any that arrive here to immediately leave if possible, and stands in commemoration to Madelyn Gao for sacrificing her life to provide valuable research on the subject of the planet Ongwan and skyquakes. All the reader need know of these phenomenon is that they appear to occur every 8 minutes and 17 seconds. And that was how it fucking ended. I could have started critiquing the message and even reread it a couple of times, but I knew my brain was about to start yelling at me about how much time had already passed in this very fucked up Ostium. How long did I have before the next skyquake hit? A minute? 2 at the most? Also, where the fuck was the skyquake? Guess I was about to find out whether I wanted to or not. I thought about trying to jump back to my former ostium piece where it seemed like there was more protection, but I didn't want to be attempting that when the shit hit the fan. So my only option, gotta love those soul single choices when your life stands on the brink, was to crouch down and hug the pedestal like it was a long-lost sibling. And then it hit. I held on for dear life as the world around me erupted in a maelstrom. And then my worst fears were confirmed. The pieces of ostium started to twist and turn, some completely flipping around. Yet they still stayed in the same place. Somehow. Still, I was fucking doomed. And then I felt my piece of ostium tilting and turning, and I went with it. I held on for as long as I could, but felt myself slipping, and then... I was falling to my death, and I did the only thing I could.
Bloody hell, Mum. How the fuck did you survive that?
I think my heart stopped just for a moment hearing your story.
Thanks, guys. But, as I said, I'm here safe and sound. Though I think that fall took a few years off my life. Maybe added a few gray hairs that I haven't managed to find yet.
Yeah, funny, whatever. What did you bloody do?
Again, I did the only thing I thought I could before I went splat on the ground below. I closed my eyes and imagined myself in the next and last ostium on my list. No clicking of the heels this time, it wasn't possible.
Holy shit, that takes fucking balls, Monica.
I take that as a compliment, Jake. And yes, it did.
Unbelievable. I'd offer to get more coffee for everyone, but I think our blood pressure is already going through the roof. So how about some chamomile tea instead?
Oh, no thanks, hun. I'm on a roll, and I want to get my story finished. Just one more ostium card to reveal.
Let's do it then.
This ostium is more like the other ones, on solid ground, which made me immediately thankful. But it didn't take me long to notice what was also very different. Above me was a massive dome covering the whole of this ostium, and through it, I could just see blackness. But just like the untethered ostium Jake and I had been on, there was a natural light shining on this town so you could see the buildings and streets and everything. I thought it was another untethered ostium at first. Or maybe even that same one we'd been on. It would be totally possible, no? Totally fucking typical of ostium, at least. But as I stared at the darkness above the dome, trying to see the stars or something else in what I thought was the firmament above, I saw a massive shadow move across my vision. Then another, and another. All different sizes, but all really fucking big. I caught a hint of iridescent green and what looked like a fin the size of a building. Then I saw a jaw that looked like it could be the length of a fucking football field. Then I saw the teeth. The many, many teeth. Each one had to be the size of a city bus standing on end. So I understood I wasn't untethered and floating through space. No, this was different, but just as terrible a horror. I was at the bottom of some really fucked up ocean. I headed for the clock tower as fast as I could, quickly noticing I wasn't running on a dirt road, but a fabricated metal platform. I got there fast, opened the door, and ran inside. I needed information. I needed to know where the fuck I was and what my options were. I ran over to the map table and saw it wasn't there. Instead, it was a big old computer screen. I touched it and everything lit up. It said welcome with an ellipses and then a speaker button, which I pressed.
Please identify yourself.
Monica Chase.
Welcome, Monica. What would you like to know?
Where the fuck am I?
You are in Ostium.
And where the fuck is this Ostium?
This Ostium is located on the continental rift zone of Lake Baikal.
Where the hell is that?
Lake Baikal is located in the Commonwealth of Russia, north of the nation of Mongolia.
And I don't know if I want to know the answer to this, but I guess I'll ask anyway. How deep are we in Lake Baikal?
You are at the bottom, located 1,642 meters, or 5,387 feet below sea level.
Damn. Okay. And what's it like up on the surface, 5,000 feet up?
Do you wish to see images?
Sure. The display showed me a destroyed planet. A world that had gone through wars and plagues and destructions, and there was now nothing left. Not a living soul, not a living thing. This was a dead planet. Whether it was once Earth, I couldn't tell. It probably was with these familiar country names, perhaps a different one, but I was honestly too afraid to ask. There was nothing I could do in this ostium. There was nothing for me here. So I closed my eyes for what I hoped would be the last time and actually felt myself praying to the gods of Ostium to get me the fuck out of here and back to the Ostium network and back to you, Jake, and you, Steve. I waited. I opened my eyes. Shit, I was still here, at the bottom of the deepest lake on the planet, and no way out. I was stuck in Ostium again, when I was pretty sure I'd never be able to get out of here on my own.
So what did you do next?
Well, that is where my tale comes to an end, my dear.
What the fuck it does?
Such language.
Coming from you, that's priceless.
Well, that's what makes it so funny.
Enough bloody obfuscating. This is not the end of your story.
You're right. Of course it's not. But I believe it was you who wanted Zhang to finish our stories for us. To bring us all back to the Ostium network, no?
Shit, you're completely right, Mum. Sorry, I was all caught up and totally forgot.
And you obviously know a lot about what happened next, Monica, but I think, as is the case with each of our stories, Zhang knows the series of events in their entirety. Isn't that right, Zhang?
I believe that to be correct, Jake, to the best of my knowledge.
Where do we get started then?
Hang on. I think Zhang also has their own tale to tell. The story of what happened here at the Ostium Network. The events of 10 years ago and what caused everyone to fucking disappear. I remember my last journal entry before I left to find Steve was a decade ago. And then there's the Ostium Network Cemetery, which I know for a fact didn't fucking exist when Steve and I were here before. We need those answers first, before we hear the end of our stories.
But I already told you about the rift sites with the explosions that killed a number of the people of the Ostium Network.
We know some people were killed that way, but not everyone. We want the full story. And what happened to other Jake? I know that guy wasn't the last one standing.
How, Mum?
I just fucking know. Call it a gut feeling.
Is this a unanimous choice for all three of you?
Yes.
I think so, Zhang. So long as you are comfortable telling us this.
I am. The full series of events that began 10 years and 14 days ago that provide the answers to your questions, Monica, have been stored in my memory banks for all this time, and I believe it is time they be shared, forthright and unedited. And who better to share with than the three of you, each of whom I have become close to and care greatly for.
The feeling is mutual, Zhang.
Ditto.
Yes, totally.
Then let us begin 3,664 days ago. This was the beginning of the end for the other Jake in this Ostium network. The loss of you, Steve, and you, Monica, were considered acceptable collateral damage. As for the security force that was sent through to retrieve you, they were never seen in this Ostium network again, as you are probably all aware. However, 5 years ago, I was able to retrieve a very tiny signal on a distant and minor tangent in the context of my quantum mainframe that I believe traced back to the security force. They are now residing on a very distant planet where there are no known predators and enjoy a climate similar to that of Earth. They will all die there, but of causes not related to the Ostium network or anything any of you did.
Okay, thanks for telling us that, Zhang. Perhaps not ideal for them, but I know I'm not the only one thinking it could have been a lot worse.
You're definitely not, Jake.
Indeed. If they had returned to the Ostium network without having retrieved either or both of you, Monica and Steve, the other Jake would likely have had them all executed.
What the fuck?
Sadly, events did lead to this as other Jake's plans continued to deteriorate, but I am getting ahead of myself. Let me continue on to the next topic. Even with the losses, other Jake considered the town of Ostium that would allow people to travel through time a complete success and began sending others through. At first, the rules were adhered to, but as more people wished to travel through the doors regardless of the risk, they were automatically approved, whether they had completed the training or not. Many returned with stories to tell of different times and places. Many also did not return. Again, it was considered an acceptable loss in the grand scheme of things. Other Jake could not get people traveling fast enough through the doors, approving other Ostium towns to be set up. There were some that collapsed in upon themselves before they could be completed. Lives were again lost. Other Ostium towns that were completed never worked. People would travel through doors and not be taken anywhere, while others would just disappear completely. Then there were those towns that became linked with the catastrophic events that could not be altered and had to either be shut down, scrapped, or abandoned. Monica, you have visited some of these horrors of the Ostium network. The other Jake became furious with these failings, and then enraged by a turn in the tide as people became hesitant about traveling through the doors, rightfully concerned they would perhaps die from unknown circumstances or simply never come back. His next step was to order people through the doors. The despicable man had a prison constructed and began incarcerating those who refused to obey orders. They were fed reduced rations and kept under taxing means that became worse as the days, weeks, and then months passed by. Some died of starvation or malnutrition, others through alternative means ordered by Other Jake. I need not go into detail.
Please don't, Zhang.
I do not intend to.
Thanks for that.
The dead of the Ostium network were at the very least given decent burials, which is where the cemetery for the Ostium network originates. One might consider this a respectful decision by the Other Jake, but his true intention was to incite fear and terror into everyone if they saw what happened to their friends and co-workers.
Also proves the point they never wanted to confirm. No one ever really leaves the Ostium network except through the doors.
Sad, but unfortunately true. It also worked because for each death there would be an elaborate funeral service. Other Jake even attended some of the funerals, much to the shock of many at the Ostium network, as each door to the past or future would be considered viable in that someone traveled through the door and came back both alive and with a report of what it was like on the other side. Other Jake would enact the second stage of his grand scheme with the Ostium network to send personnel through to take energy or life force from the past or future and bring it to this present. Jake, I believe you experienced this on one of your travels through an artifact on the map table, and you witnessed the level of horror this Other Jake is willing to go to.
I did, Zhang. I'll never forget it. None of us will after hearing me tell it.
Fucking right. Like I said before, it was the big answer to the question I kept asking, and they kept avoiding. What is the Other Jake's ultimate goal in this? And Jake saw it, and now we know. But you say that was just a snippet of what was done?
Indeed. He did it many more times, though through orders to his underlings. After that first time, he never engaged in the despicable act. Again, Jake, you saw this and were able to thwart some of their actions. Nevertheless, in doing so, Other Jake was able to carry out a number of his future plans for the Ostium network. I am sad to report I know next to nothing of these plans because Other Jake intentionally kept them hidden from everyone, including myself. I have scoured and looked to see if I can uncover something, but all for naught. At least so far, I continue to search, constantly. However, with what you have done, Jake, by cancelling events in these tangents, some of the plans that Other Jake enacted may have now been undone.
We can only hope.
And continue to search and find answers to these new questions.
Yes, I am sad to say this went on for years, over half a decade in fact, but as you can probably tell, it was not sustainable. The universe is all about balance, and the Other Jake continue to steal from other times and tangents and instances, which led to a weakening in the conduits for the doors. Some doors would just cease to work, preventing access to those who wished to use the door, and sadly, leaving people on the other side of where the door took them. There were many of these people abandoned in time. Even as it became clear this could happen with any door, Other Jake kept pushing and forcing people through. Many more lives were lost, some funerals were held, an empty coffin was buried. I have tried over the years to see if I can find an inkling of life with these lost people. I have had some success. Some did die, as is to be expected in the strange new world they found themselves in, but I am also happy to say a few survived in their new alien worlds.
Strangers in a strange land.
Damn right. Fuck, that's cold.
How did it end, Zhang? I want to hear how this arsehole got his comeuppance.
I again am sad to say, Steve, you will not be happy with my answer, but I will tell you anyway, because you have requested it. As you know, through your recent travels, Steve, The vast amount of power required to fuel those doors and Ostium towns is through a small army of kidnapped sorcerers, wizards, witches, and all others who possess and are able to cast magic from throughout the universe. I do know that Other Jake, during these 5 years, was relentless in kidnapping, stealing, and capturing these people, and imprisoning them to keep up with the immense power demand of the Ostium network. But as you also know, with Thyra and Yoxel, to name 2, there were a number who would not keep quiet and do as they were told. They constantly fought back and never gave up. Some died for it. Others sacrificed themselves so that others might suffer less or even attempt an escape. Steve, you were instrumental in helping them, which I am now certain has led to a quicker end to Other Jake's plans.
Wait a bloody minute. Let me try and get this straight. I'm not as fourth-dimensionally minded as Mum and Jake, so let's try and walk me through this. I helped Marla and Yoxel hopefully escape, and you're telling me that, in turn, messed with Other Jake's plans for the Ostium network, and led to things falling apart faster?
Yes, as well as what Monica and Jake did for Thyra.
But we did all that pretty bloody recently. Very fucking recently in my case. And you're saying that helped cause things to come to an end? About 5 years ago?
That is correct, Steve.
Okay, fine, Zhang. I'll take your word for it. If I think too much about it, I'll give myself a bloody headache. What happened next?
I could explain it to you in further detail if you wish, Steve, to ensure you understand it fully.
No thanks, I'm good. Let's just chalk it up to some timey-wimey stuff, as Mum likes to say, and leave it at that, okay?
As you wish, Steve. To continue, with the significant decrease in power for the Ostium network, as well as a growing rebellion from these imprisoned magic wielders, as well as the collapsing and permanent closing of the doors.
I see what you did there. Nice one.
Thank you. And the continuing loss of life in the Ostium network. To use a cliché, it was becoming apparent that the Ostium network had become a sinking ship. One might even go so far as to compare it to the Titanic. Immense, a wonder, and unsinkable. But now, if you will allow me to mix metaphors briefly, the rats were abandoning the sinking ship and leaving little in their wake.
And Other Jake?
Yeah, how did this bastard end up as the last guy on the ship while the band played on?
As I said, sadly, things did not end up that way, as you might have surmised they would. If ever there could be said to be an end time for the people of the Ostium network, then this was them, some 5 years ago. Doors were shutting down daily, morale was at an all-time low, as lives continued to be lost. Suicides even began to occur, a most sad event. One might consider calling it a ghost town of sorts, and one would not be wrong. Other Jake knew it was the end for this Ostium network, and this is where I am sad to admit a failing. I continued to be focused on helping anyone I could, on making things just a little bit better for the day-to-day of everyone, that I was not paying attention to him and what he was doing. You see, he was planning his escape, and I never saw it coming. I feel so ashamed, which seems a ridiculous sentiment for an artificial intelligence to feel.
It's not, Zhang.
Not by a bloody long shot. All this proves to me is that you are so much more than an artificial intelligence. So much more than, if you will permit me to say, a simple machine. You were working hard to make life better for those you could. That means so much more. It means you bloody care, Zhang, which just makes you more human in my eyes, if you don't mind me saying.
I have no words to respond to this, Steve, except to say I do not mind by any means. It means a lot to me.
And this is a sentiment we all share, Zhang. As we've gotten to know you so much better over this short time, each day you felt more human. More like us.
Sincerely?
Without question.
I have no words again. I am touched. touched beyond words.
Well said, Zhang.
Now let me move past my error and continue with my story. It was not until someone began looking for other Jake and could not discover him anywhere that I began to focus on his disappearance. At first, it was assumed that he was off somewhere where he could not be found, wanting privacy perhaps, time to himself as things were going so bad. Some speculated he was trying to carry out a new plan to bring the Ostium network back to a form of its former success, its supposed glory days, if you will. But days eventually turned into a week, and then multiple weeks, and other Jake was nowhere to be found. When I saw it was all becoming something of a concern, I began combing through the archives for all the cameras in the Ostium network, using a relatively simple algorithm to narrow it down to other Jake, and I was not surprised to discover the answer to his mysterious disappearance in a relatively short amount of time, or the cause of it. I notified those who wished to know and showed them the footage of other Jake traveling with a few personal belongings in an unmarked black bag that was made of a material that prevented me from analyzing and discovering what its contents might be. The footage showed him going up to the headquarters control at the top of the rock late one night from weeks before he was reported missing. There was no one there, and he traveled in the dark with a small torch, although he barely needed it, for he knew exactly where he was going. I expect he had it to make sure he did not trip over anything and alert either me or others of a disturbance or noise. At first, it appeared he was going to his office, but he did not stop there. Upon entering and quietly closing the door, he engaged a hidden mechanism behind his desk, which caused a hidden doorway to open in the wall. The first time I viewed this footage, I will admit I was immensely surprised. I have detailed schematics in my memory banks of every square centimeter of the Ostium network, and yet this was a hidden door I knew nothing about. It does not appear on any blueprint or map in my possession. It is a door that has remained known only to other Jake and no one else. As he walked through with his single bag, I was only able to view this from the single camera in this office. I could not follow him through the door, but I already comprehended enough to know what had happened after he went through and closed it behind him, whereupon the secret location of the door promptly vanished. I told those watching, who were wondering where this door led, that it was not just any door, but specifically an Ostium door, one that could take other Jake to any place in time and space. There was no possible way of knowing where he had gone. The despicable man had a secret Ostium door constructed, or had in fact himself constructed it in a hidden place in his office where no one but he would know to find it. For just such a series of events as was happening in the Ostium network, it was his escape hatch, his emergency exit, his get-out-of-jail-free card, to use an old colloquialism. The coward had run away instead of facing and dealing with the wrath and death and destruction he had wrought. After they saw the footage, they went up to his office and engaged the secret locking device. The door was revealed and popped open. However, when they got close to it and peered through, all they found on the other side was a small closet space. The Ostium door had been designed to cease working after one use. It was now just an ordinary door to a pointless space. And the few remaining people of the Ostium network now understood what had happened and felt truly alone and despondent. I now come toward the end of my tale of these last 10 years, and they are perhaps the worst of them all in many ways. At this point, there were only 48 people remaining at the Ostium network. Because almost all services are automated, this fortunately did not lead to a shutting down of essential items and functions like food and plumbing. The remaining people were able to survive with all the amenities they had become used to. Nevertheless, apathy quickly set in, as there was neither leadership nor direction in their lives to keep going. Their options were very limited. They could try some of the few remaining doors in Ostium at their own risk, or they could accept the fate they had been dealt and live out the rest of their lives at the Ostium network. They would have everything they needed to have enjoyable lives, but such is not the human spirit. If I can say I have learned anything in my time working and interacting with human beings, it is that they are never willing to simply give up and accept the status quo. Of course, there were always a few who proved the opposite, and there were 4 who were willing to live their lives here. The rest began meeting and working together to devise ways of leaving the Ostium network and escaping. Each day, a number of them would come to me with questions about how they could leave the Ostium network. Each time I had to tell them there was really only one certain way, and that was through an Ostium door. The route through which the boat would come to deliver new employees was no more. The connection that had allowed it had been severed years ago. Very intentionally, I might add, by other Jake. He had no plans for more people to come, and he wanted to make sure no one would leave except under his supervision through the doors. Each time they came up with a new idea, a new possibility, they would come to me with a question, and I would tell them it would not work. I had to be completely honest with them each time, as I explained after seeing what other Jake had done. There could well be a number of options that could lead to one escaping the island that was simply hidden to me. They asked if there was any sort of aerial craft, or possibly even a rocket ship, hidden somewhere within the island. I told them I simply did not know. I had full blueprints and detailed schematics for what I thought was every building on the island, and had never come across any sort of flying craft anywhere on the island. They also came to me asking about water vessels of any kind. Again, I told them there was nothing to my knowledge other than the luxury yacht that originally brought most of the people to the Ostium network, but now seemed almost certain to never return again. Each time the group would walk away dejected, and I would feel myself suffering along with them to some extent. They were hopeless and depressed each time, after arriving with possibility and a light in their eyes. A group of 8 of them would not take no for an answer, and instead began constructing their own shipping vessel using resources found throughout the island. It did not take long before their number swelled to 20 working on the boat. It was very well executed, I must admit. There were those who researched and studied shipbuilding, those who worked on what resources were needed and what they might actually have to work with, and those who would go out and work on getting those resources through whatever means they could. Yes, this included taking apart furniture and walls of buildings and whatever else they needed. There was no longer the other Jake or anyone in leadership to dictate otherwise. I suppose if anyone were to be considered in charge, it would be me, with how they would continue to come to me seeking help and advice, but I never considered myself as such, and had no problem with what they were doing. No one else was being harmed, which was fine by me, and then there were a few members orchestrating everything, which was key in bringing the project to fruition. 4 months went by. A few people passed away due to suicide. I tried to intervene and help each time, but they learned how to avoid the cameras and escape my scrutiny. It hurt each time I discovered another body, and there were others that went through the Ostium doors. Whether they survived on the other side, I was unable to tell or learn through my searching the tangents. I hoped they did. But then the boat was complete, which had involved by the end some 35 people. It was designed to hold a crew of at least 30, though it was not known until the final day it would set sail how many would be traveling on board. Many came to me asking what their chances were, heading out on the seas around the island and surviving. I could not give them honest odds or percentages, or I simply did not know, and utmost I wanted to be honest. They were able to carry enough supplies to last them an entire year. They also were bringing equipment that would allow them to create some of their own food. They also carried a desalination machine, so fresh water would not become a problem until the machine ceased working. A number of them were trained in how it worked, and they carried tools and extra parts. There was only a small motor to propel the boat if needed at a slow speed of 5 knots, but this would only be a last resource. Masts, booms, and great sails had been constructed and created, and the boat would move fastest and most efficiently through wind power. From all outward appearances, their chance of survival appeared favorable, but each time I was asked, I had to follow this up with the caveat that I was unaware of what, if anything, was out there on the seas. There was simply no way of knowing. And then the day arrived, and there were 30 people who made the big and bold decision to go. The remaining 7 people joined them in a final large feast where there was much joy and laughter, and then the ship was set off in the deep waters, and I have heard nothing of it since. I was able to watch its movement for a number of kilometers as it headed out to sea from the highest vantage point at the top of the rock, while I observed nothing else upon the waters except that solitary boat, and then that too disappeared. I have not detected nor heard anything from the boat or the crew since it was gone from my detection. As for the 7 remaining members of the Ostium network, 3 went through one of their last remaining Ostium doors within 2 weeks, and the last 4 accepted their lives as permanent members of the Ostium network. Again, so very sadly, this did not remain so. One died 2 years later from a bad fall they could not recover from, even with medical intervention. 2 chose to end their lives, plummeting from the top of the rock, and the last decided he was done with the Ostium network, and went through the same door the last 3 had gone through. Whether he survived, went on his merry way, or ever joined up with the others, I do not know. But I like to think he found them eventually, as I was left completely alone in the Ostium network, a feeling I know each of you has dealt with to some extent. And so, more time went by, another year, then 1 more, and then halfway into the next, everything changed once more. There is an old adage from the last few decades of the 20th century that you are all probably somewhat familiar with respect to technology, that when one is having trouble with a particular piece of technology, one can just turn it off and or unplug it, count to 30 or 60, and then plug it back in, and or turn it back on again, and discover that somehow the problem has been resolved. This is as close as I can come to understanding and accepting what happened. It was a blackout. Throughout the Ostium network. I do not know for how long, because I was non-functional during that time. But when I came back along with everything else, I knew that something had changed. Something monumental had happened throughout the network, and there was now a person entering the gates of Ostium who I had never seen before, and someone named Monica who I already knew of. It was not long after that the explosive time rifts began in the Ostium network, and that essentially brings everything near enough up to the present, involving the 3 of you.
Whoa. Wait a fucking second. There's a big disconnect going on here, and I'm really not cool with it. So you had this huge reset thing where everything went dark for a second or a month or a year or whatever, and then it all magically turned back on and it was all back to normal, and then the shit hit the fan and Ostium is back up and running or something, and Jake is there for the first time? Okay, I'll buy all that, no problem. But the bit where you lose me is how I suddenly show up in Ostium? What the fuck? I left the Ostium network 10 fucking years ago, and now I show up?
This conundrum was immediately apparent to me, Monica. And yes, before you shout at me, I know conundrum belittles the way you feel, and in your words,
This is a big fucking deal.
But it is also a mystery that appears not to make any sense. You traveled through the Inception Chamber, and then 10 years later you appeared in the town of Ostium.
But why? Fucking how?
I am sorry, Monica. I simply do not know. I have analyzed these instances to the best of my abilities from every angle I can conceive of, but there is no definitive answer. You went through the door 10 years ago and appeared in Ostium a little over 2 months ago. I do not believe you have aged at all, even though 10 years of physical time has passed. But then there are some significant time dilations for all three of you.
I've been wondering about that for a while, pretty much since we arrived at the Ostium Network. I know the Ostium Network is from a time in the relatively distant future, whereas I come from a time in the early 21st century.
Yes, Jake. Much like Monica, you too have jumped forward in time. A greater distance than Monica has, to be sure.
Okay, but did it happen when I came to the Ostium Network, or was it before that, when I first stepped foot in Ostium?
I am uncertain, Jake. I would think it would apply to your first entering the town of Ostium, and especially once it became untethered and completely separated from your original time tangent. But none of this can be actually confirmed or denied. These are simply what I consider to be the most likely hypotheses.
Thanks, Zhang. At least your ideas line up with mine.
Okay, I've been stalling enough. You said all three of us have significant time dilations. So what's mine?
Steve, yours is the most severe and pronounced of all. If you wish me to tell you, I guarantee you will hear things you have never known, and I am uncertain whether you are ever supposed to have known. This applies to all of you, but I know our friendship is built on trust and honesty, and I am willing to tell you what you wish to know.
Oh shit, that sounds ominous. What do you think, guys?
I'd be lying if I didn't say I wasn't dying to find out, but Zhang is saying it's a really big deal. Like cosmic level shit that only some of the instances of Steve should know or something. I don't know, man. I think you have to decide if you're ready for it.
Oof, not really helping, mate. What do you think, Mum?
I'm going to say 2 things. 1, only you can be completely honest with yourself and know if you're ready for this. And 2, I definitely think you're strong enough to hear this ultimate fucking truth or whatever it is and keep on going.
Thanks, Mum. I appreciate your candor. And yes, I think you're right. But Zhang, why didn't you tell me this important information about my life before?
I believe you already know.
Because it wasn't the right time for me. Gotcha. All right, Zhang, let's have at it then.
Very well, Steve. When you stepped into the town of Ostium and experienced that fractured reality of seeing multiple worlds and times, it also had a divisive effect on your corporeal being pertaining to the instance of time you were specifically in. You too experienced a fracturing, and to some degree became 2 Steves. Or perhaps to put it in a clearer way, you became Steve and Dave.
Bloody hell.
Should I continue?
Please don't stop.
Very well. I do not really know how else to say this other than through that fracturing for a period, you lived 2 lives. You lived the life of Steve, found as a baby by Monica and raised, and eventually joined the Ostium Network, which led to the event that caused all this. But after that fracturing, there was also an emergence of Dave, who grew up and lived in England during the 1990s, and experienced a different life, where you lost your foster parents through unknown means, and then went through a deep depression, but came out of it with help and support from friends. And then you began the enigmatic mysteries of the unknown, which led you to finding out about Ostium.
Yes, through my recordings I started uploading in 2017.
Time is not linear, even if it is believed to be by those who do not understand what it can do.
That's why I like to just call it timey-wimey.
Indeed.
So was Steve living this other life as Dave during those 10 years when I was, I don't know, in time limbo or whatever?
I can understand your wanting to explain it that way. It does appear to make a sort of chronological sense, getting the puzzle pieces to fit together, so to speak, but it doesn't really compute. There are separate time tangents for each of you. For you, Monica, you stepped through the door and arrived in Ostium 10 years later relative to the Ostium network, but also in the year 2017 relative to Jake Fisher. Meanwhile, Dave existed in his tangent during the 1990s and was able to somehow connect with the year 2017 through his research. I do not know if the version of the internet he was using somehow connected to that time, or whether it was Jake's recordings that were reaching across time.
Or maybe it was Ostium just doing its Ostium thing and bringing us into the Ostium network when it wanted to.
I am very hesitant to give this nebulous entity of Ostium such power and credence, but I also know what has happened to each of you, and cannot confidently say that this is completely out of the realm of possibility.
I think it's a topic we can talk about for a lot longer if we want, but I don't think this is the time. I know there are more answers we can try and tease out with our discussions, but they can wait. I think we need to get our stories finished with your telling, Zhang.
If everyone is in agreement.
Sure.
All right, let's do this.
Very well. As you all recall, when the three of you disappeared through the magical anomaly you created, you were only gone for a total time of 3.22 seconds. A few blinks of the eye to ordinary people, but for an artificial intelligence like myself, it was a microcosm of an eternity, if you will allow me to get a little poetic.
Always.
Thank you. These are the events that occurred over these 3.22 seconds. You have no doubt heard of and even used the expression time is relative, which you can all relate to now, what with your various time dilations. My first goal was to attempt to find where each of you had gone. It took me a fraction of a second to locate each of you with your unique signatures, which from my perspective is a considerable length of time for something I would consider relatively simple. I was able to track you on each of your respective journeys as you overcame your hurdles and helped those you could and traveled onto these varied and disparate places. And it was after each of you had been traveling for some time, and one would think approaching a conclusion to your journeys, that the event happened. After describing that other time when my system appeared to shut down and then reboot, this was similar in some ways, but, and here I struggle to describe it to you with a concept that will be easy for you to understand. Let us say it was more of a localized shutdown. There was a blackness, an emptiness, an end to the segment, this parameter of the Ostium network that I was monitoring. And in case you have not guessed, this was of course exactly where all three of you were located on your respective journeys. Wanting to maintain complete honesty with all of you, I will admit that for the first time since the beginning of my existence, I panicked. This feels the most correct term for what I experienced. A combination of alarm, increased activity, a rising in heat, and a blossoming feeling of concern for each of you. I suppose tied in with that was also a sense of loss. That you all might be gone, and I would be most unhappy if that were to occur.
Wow, thank you, Zhang. That means a lot.
This time together really has brought us all closer.
Okay, guys, come on. Let's not get too sappy, and let Zhang continue with their story. We're all here. We all know we survive. But I still want to find out how the fuck it all went down.
Thank you, Monica, but also thank you, Steve and Jake, for your kind comments. If you will allow me to use an expression, I will say that the silver lining here was that this blackness, a word I use very intentionally here, only lasted for a fraction of a second, and then everything appeared to return to normal. Except none of you were where you had been before. As a matter of fact, I could not find any of you, and so I began my hunt to locate you again, and this time it took me a significant amount of time. If it were to be measured by the normal passage of time on average, it would have been over a year.
Bloody hell!
But I was never dissuaded and would never give up. I did eventually find each of you, and the feeling within my core when I did. It was the opposite feeling to that of when I had believed you were all gone.
Can I ask you a question, Zhang, if you don't mind?
Please do, Jake.
Do you have any idea what might have caused the blackout this time? I know you said you didn't know what it was last time, and that was when I first entered Ostium, but any thoughts on this other incident?
I do have one hypothesis that I will continue to work on to try to improve. However, if I tell you what it is now, it will cloud and affect everything else I tell you about what happened subsequently.
Okay. I know I said I wanted you to keep telling the story, but this seems like a pretty big fucking deal. And I think we all need to know what it is. Now.
Yeah, I'm with Mum on this.
Very well. I believe it was the other Jake. I believe he was the cause for the temporary blackout. He somehow was able to identify each of your locations and have an effect on where you went next. I believe his intention was to trap you, to harm you, and likely cause your end.
In the words of Marty McFly, with an expletive added, whoa, this is fucking heavy.
How can you be sure it was him?
I am unsure. That is why it is only a hypothesis. But as much as I have studied the incident and everything I can around it, there are just telltale marks that make me believe it involves other Jake. Just as I am able to recognize your unique signatures, this is in no way as strong or clear, but bears some minor resemblance in how I compute and access it. This is the best I feel I can describe at this point.
It's pretty mind-blowing.
Do you think other Jake may have been involved in the other blackout incident? The first one you had?
I simply do not know. It may be possible, but I have next to no data on it and cannot even hypothesize about it. Nevertheless, there is always the possibility.
Okay, I think if we keep talking about it, we won't finish the story. We'll put a pin in this to be discussed further later. So what happened next, Zhang?
When I discovered each of your unique signatures again, I was surprised to discover them all in the same location.
The other ostium at the bottom of Lake Baikal?
Yes, although each of you experienced being there in different ways and through different filters. For you, Steve, this was the final level of the tower you had been climbing, and it was in that same dark, glowing world where it was hard to make out specific details, but you knew you were in Ostium Town, even if you were unsure it was the one you had visited before.
Well, I guess now I know for sure it wasn't. Shocker and spoiler alert, there are different bloody Ostium towns, just to make things easier.
Indeed. And Jake, you chose a final artifact to use, hoping it would bring you back to the Ostium network. Which one was it?
It was, actually, thinking about it now, it's pretty funny. It was this pyramid-shaped artifact that I'd never seen before. Had a big O on the base. I thought it sort of reminded me of the Rock of Gibraltar and took that as a sign this might get me back to the Ostium network.
Interesting. And when you arrived, how did this Ostium town appear to you?
Dark and cold. Not glowing like Steve saw, but like this was a place that never really got any sun and spent a lot of time in almost darkness. Actually reminded me of when we were in Ostium after it got untethered, and it's what I imagined it would be like if there wasn't any of that natural light that made it possible to see. Guess it all sort of ties together.
Like things tend to do in Ostium.
I think it best if you each tell your final chapters to your stories now, because even though you were all in the same Ostium town, you never came in contact with each other or knew that you were all there at the same time.
Not a clue. Guess I'll go first. So it didn't take me long to snap out of my bad mood about being stuck in a place all alone. I've had way too much fucking experience with that to let it get to me anymore. So I started looking around for solutions, for clues, or for fucking something to give me a chance. If I found another pantry full of food, you bet I was going to go looking for a secret tiny doorway. But instead I opened a door and before me was the weird tower of wet chairs. The music was going and everything. I didn't hesitate. I ran the fuck over to it, sticking my body under the bottom chair to get nice and dripped on, and then quickly started climbing.
Wait a bloody second. That's what happened to me. I started opening doors and checking out rooms, and then I found one with the glowy pyramid and did the same thing. Got myself all nice and wet, no innuendos please, and started climbing.
Jake, are you going to chime in too?
How did you know, Monica?
Call it a woman's intuition. Or maybe I've just been hanging around the Ostium network too fucking long.
Well, you're totally right. I started hunting around like you guys, checking out rooms, and then found one that had the same glowing chair stack. I actually wiped my hands on the wet chairs and got myself good and soggy that way, then started climbing.
Hold on. Zhang, you said we were all in the same place, the same ostium. Were we climbing the bloody chair pyramid at the same time?
Yes, you all were.
Then how the hell didn't we see each other when we got to the top? Why didn't we meet?
Because, as I recall, the magic started working when I was like halfway up and then... it did its thing, and I was back in the original room where this whole shindig started.
Yeah, it was the same for me, and presumably the same for you, Steve. If we had made it to the top, we probably would have seen each other then, if the magic worked before that happened.
I don't know. It still seems pretty far-fetched to me.
Might I remind you, Steve, that it was a considerably large pyramid?
Yeah, I suppose.
And this particular room had a door on each wall to allow entry.
Well, that's bloody convenient. How come this chair pyramid was even there to begin with?
That is easy to answer. I put it there.
What?
How?
I will admit, I surprised myself in this endeavor. When I knew you were all in the same location, I decided to invent a way to get you all back to the Ostium network. I employed the same mechanism that set you all on your respective journeys and was able to manipulate reality in this location to cause the pyramid to come into existence.
So you're saying without you, we'd still be stuck there?
Most likely. You are a resilient trio, but you would probably be still trying to devise a way to leave.
Is this the first time you've done something like this, Zhang?
I believe so. I see it as akin to when you create your doors, or ostiums, Jake.
Well, I guess you've leveled up now, too.
I suppose you could say that.
You are no longer Gandalf the Grey, but Gandalf the White.
Yes, Steve. Very droll.
Cheers.
And that's how we all got back home safely to Kansas. Or, rather, the Ostium network.
Only a few scratches and bruises.
And some incredible stories to tell.
Yeah, they sure were. Like some really crazy dreams.
What? You don't dream of unicorns and rainbows and paradise every night?
Can't say I do.
No, you're alone there, Mum.
Lucky me.
Okay, with that, I think I'm ready to call it tonight.
Ditto.
Thank you very much, Zhang, for all your help and input over the last few days. To say it's been enlightening would be falling far too short of the truth.
As is the case with each of your stories, may your dreams tonight be restful and uneventful.
You too. Not that you need to sleep or have dreams, but if you do power down a bit or whatever.
Thank you, Steve.
Night, honey. See you tomorrow.
Night, Mum. Night, Jake.
Night, Steve. And thanks, Zhang. I want a dream where I'm Jack Bauer, eating a sandwich and watching a ball game and not caring about anything in the world.
Sounds like paradise to me.